Hello, welcome to today's talk. I'm Dr. Christopher Porter. I'm Google's head of international security cooperation. So I'm sort of our chief liaison officer setting up intelligence sharing agreements around the world. I want to talk to you a little bit today about a topic that's, I think, fast exploding in interest, artificial intelligence. I specifically want to talk about the balance between offense and defense. My career has been spent in intelligence analysis, so I'm sort of a professional pessimist, or at least it's my job to find problems, not solutions. This is an area where I'm actually a little bit of an optimist that the net benefit of AI will help defense probably in the long term much more than offense. But it could be a rocky road between here and what we eventually end up with. So I want to talk a little bit today about what artificial intelligence is good for today. If you're on attacker who's on offense, if you're on defense, how can you use it today? But also fundamentally, what is it good for attackers and defenders, and project a little bit into the future about what that might look like, 1, 2, 3 years ahead. To start off, I just want to very briefly level set. How is it that someone working at a private sector company like Google could possibly know some of the things that we're going to talk about, particularly the foreign military and intelligence operations? How could we possibly know that working in the private sector? Well, think about the products and services that we offer. 5 billion users or browsers running safe browsing. If you get a malicious domain detection, maybe they can get your browser or device. Maybe not, but maybe they do manage to compromise it. But pretty quickly, that gets shared back up with us, and everyone gets defended. Likewise with Gmail, attackers may spin up a Gmail account, use it on offense to spearfish someone, or more commonly, they would target our users with malware. You have a lot of privacy protections. I can't necessarily look at the actual contents of your Gmail on a regular basis, but the actual malware that's being sent back and forth, those are all opportunities for us to catch their operation. VirusTotal, every major antivirus vendor endpoint detection in the world is sharing their results, sharing their signatures, what they're finding, what they think of different files. So you can compare all of that. That's commercially available. It's the same information that we have. There's nothing additional that I have, but we run that service and have access to it at large scale. And we also control a lot of the physical infrastructure. At any given point, roughly a quarter of the internet goes over our fiber lines or our servers. So when data is in motion, for example, if it's been stolen by a nation state and they're later trying to leak it or something like that, not every time, but sometimes we might have an opportunity to catch that in motion and see who's doing what or what infrastructure the attackers are using, because we can see a certain map of a quarter of the internet at one time. And obviously, whatever we learn from trends in cloud threats as well, from companies and government agencies who are using our infrastructure themselves, we can also see who's attacking them. Fundamentally, what artificial intelligence is being used for today, and here I mostly mean generative AI. In the movies or in a TV show, you can see hackers using AI to generate 0 days or to launch autonomous agentic operations. That is feasible. That is something that may be coming in the future. But today, what is largely happening is not that kind of super interesting, made for media operation. Mostly what AI is used for is translation. And that can literally just be language translation. You can imagine that there are very advanced actors. Iran would be a good example. Very high quality actors, but where they mostly focus in region. That could be because that's where their interests are. That's who they want to hack. But it also is going to be that there's going to be parts of the world where they may not have a sufficient number of language speakers to go after different parts of the world. They probably have someone who speaks most of their target languages, but there's a high opportunity cost. They may only have a few people who speak Korean or something like that at a native level, enough level to produce a believable spearfish as part of a cyber operation, right? They may not have a big supply of those. So they're mostly constrained locally, or in Iran's case, maybe a little bit in Europe and the US. But you could imagine when you take away the language barrier, suddenly they can target everyone on Earth. There's a lot of very skilled cybercriminal and nation state groups in Latin America and in the Gulf states, Palestine, where they have a high level of technical skill, but maybe only speak their local language. Particularly smaller hacktivist groups, criminal groups, or less sophisticated nation states could be very skilled technically, but just don't have those language skills. If you live in the region, they're a huge problem. They're on your list of top APTs that's targeting you. If you don't, you've never heard of them. I think probably today it's not really a barrier, and certainly over the next year or two, a lot of organizations are going to have that sort of mental list of what APTs you're most concerned about that you're always following. It's going to grow. There's going to be a broader array of actors you're concerned about because language barrier goes down. There's also countries that are somewhat insulated by speaking a language that's not common worldwide. If you're in Japan, you're doing business there. Yes, there are Japanese speakers, particularly in China and in region, and there are some expatriate communities in Brazil and the U.S. and elsewhere. But it's not English or French or other commonly spoken world languages. It's in little pockets. So institutions in Japan are targeted by the North Koreas, China's, and organized crime groups of the world, but they're targeted by a lot of the same ones over and over and over again. It's very dense in that way, and the language barrier insulates them somewhat. The third thing, actually, if I could, throw a little asterisk, those are the top two conceptual things that AI is being used for today to broaden your reach if you're an APT group or to remove barriers, defensive barriers from language. It helps everyone, regardless of language proficiency, when moving laterally within a network. So if you get one person's account, but you really want their colleague or their boss's account, it's not enough to speak the target language. You also have to sort of sound and look like them, and it helps if you can reference real world events from their life that maybe are buried down in their email. So the moving laterally spearfish doesn't look generic from a colleague's email. It is from a colleague, and it says, "Hey boss, I have to go home early. My kid is sick again," and the kid was sick last week. That is just really it is just human nature to then click on whatever thing they're asking you to do because they're referencing real world events. We aren't as people accustomed to that kind of thing, particularly moving laterally, not from outside your network, but an already compromised account inside your network. Very high efficacy rate. So those are things that have happened already today. But don't take my word for it. The major LLMs, like Google Gemini, but ChatGPT and others as well, have a lot of guardrails that prevent actors from going in and asking for help with crimes or offensive cyber. Not 100% effective, but pretty close. I mean, a lot of effort by all the major artificial intelligence LLM providers goes into putting in place guardrails that prevent abuse. And certainly, obviously, criminal queries are not going to go through on any of the major platforms. But there are open source models put out by Llama and others for use at home and for use by researchers. Criminals take those and they train them to answer explicitly criminal queries and to help with malware development. Some of those become sophisticated enough that they can sell to each other. These are essentially business-to-business operations, AI business-to-business operations. It just happens to be that the business is cybercrime. But look at what they're using it for, right? Yes, some vulnerability exploitation, but that's mostly maybe what you would used to use Metasploit for. They can see infrastructure on a target network and they're asking, are there vulnerabilities available? This is not writing new 0 days. Technical support and code generation, this is fixing their existing code or repackaging it to help with signature evasion. Again, it's not developing truly novel malware. It is handling some of the back office routine maintenance tasks so that their hackers are spending their time hacking instead of programming or fixing bugs and that kind of thing. But almost all of the major criminal GPTs offer help with phishing. They have different. That is the main thing that people buy these packages for is to help craft research and phishing packages. So that translation aspect could literally be language, but it could also be just having good theory of mind on your target, referencing news events that are relevant to the targeted corporation, something that gets you in the thought process of the target and will get them to click that link. That is, you can run a criminal business like that. Here's an example of a currently unattributed but probably cyber criminal group that we can see using one of the LLMs. You can see that these are actual requests they're making, and they're asking for help, essentially programming advice and technical support advice, trying to take parts of their operation that are not intrinsically malicious, but actually are part of their offensive operation, trying to get help fixing their code or addressing a target that they're trying to go after. But you can see them using the LLM, but in a way that is essentially legitimate. They're fixing software, and it's not intrinsically malicious. But obviously, in their case, the other parts of the code that the LLM doesn't see may be malicious. Criminals also use AI to sell AI. You can't sell these big GPT packages. This one's a malware GPT. No one is going to buy it with Bitcoin if you have a bad reputation, if they go to install it and it doesn't work. And they have to offer some kind of technical support. So in the past, these kinds of services would have had maybe an entry-level hacker would spend some of their time going on offense, getting new victims, and some of their time doing tech support. Or if it's a small group, everyone sort of kicks in and does everything. Here, they are having AI handle the first and maybe even second rung of technical support, fix the GPT that they've sold without having to get a human involved. You could imagine all enterprises have this issue where you want your people doing the thing that they are uniquely best at, focusing on their comparative advantage. You also may have only a limited ability to get certain technical personnel. You don't want to use those people that you can't get enough of to do things that are replaceable. You have plenty of work for them to do, in other words, much more work than you do personnel, and you want them focused on the most valuable thing. Well, that problem is magnified when hiring involves evading the police, right? It's not easy for them to recruit new skilled people. They don't know that it's not a police informant or something like that. So, very high opportunity cost for their skilled hackers. They really want to push code generation, maintenance, maintaining victim lists, payroll, dealing with customers. They want to push all that to AI if they can. DeepMind, our AI research lab, did a study, I believe it was early last year, looking at operations in which generative AI was used, what was it used for. There's a lot to be said about this chart, but for today, I guess the thing I want to point out is that deepfake audio is actually more common than deepfake video. I think that defies expectation. This study, again, is over a year old, but I suspect if we did it again today, it probably would be even more lopsided. If you think about the human mind, you're wired from birth to recognize faces, right? To recognize mom's face, dad's face to a lesser extent, to recognize faces. And so it's really hard to create believable deepfake video. We're also social creatures. If you see a video that is technically imperceptibly realistic looking, but it's something incredible happening, you will just ask other people for their opinion. Did you see this video? Do you think it's true? You'll go on Snopes and look it up. Audio, on the other hand, the human mind, terrible at detecting even small problems in audio. That's why ventriloquism works. We have poor directional audio processing in our brains. We also, if you think about it, if you had someone that you've known your entire life, a spouse or a colleague or a parent, and they call you on a phone from a new number, but it's like a bad connection, you might not recognize who they are, even if you talk to them all the time. Who is this? Whatever. Whereas if I showed you a pixelated video of a celebrity, you would know who it was, even though it was very poor quality. So this is sort of, this is not the researchers' words, these are my words. I would argue that some of this is a natural choice being made based on efficacy. The fake audio is more effective than fake video, easier to pull off and more effective. And some of that is just hardwired in the human brain. There's not a lot you can do about that. There have been some sophisticated efforts to sort of automatically detect fake audio and fake video, and those are helpful. But ultimately, this is a policy problem. We live in a world where someone calling you on the phone, even if they're a CEO or something, giving you an order to transfer money or to reset their password or something sensitive like that, you can no longer rely on an audio message, audio only message to convey authoritative instructions. You don't know that it's not somebody posing as them. So every organization should be thinking about, either explicitly in our plans or implicitly just as part of normal business culture, when do we allow people to call up and give these kinds of sensitive operational orders? Many big tech companies are getting hit with people calling in, posing as an executive, asking for their password to be reset. Many, I would say mostly small and medium-sized businesses, are getting hit with million-dollar losses where somebody calls up accounts payable and orders them to pay some suspicious PDF invoice that just came in. And if it sounds like the CEO, I mean, why wouldn't you? So just be careful about that. This is mostly going to have to be defeated with policy, not technology, at least in the near term. Costs can be substantial, even for organizations that are fairly sophisticated. This is the audio in particular is going to be almost 100% believable. It's just human nature to do, especially if you know the person, do what they're asking. And if they're your boss's boss, I've had cases where the person working it, kind of felt or suspected that something was off about the request, but it's still just really hard to say no to a much more senior person. So again, look at where you can come up with out-of-band ways of approving this, require the use of the corporate network to approve big money transfers or password changes. If it's sensitive enough or big enough, require it to be in person. You may have to put a little bit of grit in there to prevent this. Nation-state actors know that this works too. North Korea has placed IT workers at companies, tech companies, and cryptocurrency companies all around the world. These are remote work programming jobs. These are real high-skilled developers. They work typically several concurrent jobs, and that brings home a lot of money for the North Korean regime. And a small but, dangerous but small percentage of cases, they also are enabling software supply chain attacks or insider attacks on the company. Or in the case of the cryptocurrency companies, they're just directly draining the accounts. But the software supply chain operations, I think, really worry us. Those show signs of ties to North Korean intelligence. So mostly this is just a moneymaker for the regime. But when it's necessary for intelligence gathering, they could go into a small company that forms some important part of the software supply chain of a bigger target, for example, and get some way of getting their code in and therefore compromising that other bigger software package or company. We ran a little internal experiment. Again, the same DeepMind researchers who just a couple of days ago, our researchers won another Nobel Prize. That's three that our researchers have won in recent years. So I would argue the world's best frontier AI researchers, certainly in terms of application. And we asked them, or they came up with an experiment to take some of the Intel data that we had, all the thousands of operations that we've seen in Google Intelligence. We broke them down into phases. And these are APT groups, world-class operations, the best tactics that we've seen. Could we train an LLM to do this on offense? And what we found here, you can see the darker squares indicate greater levels of success autonomously without human intervention. The lighter squares, it had required human intervention or didn't work. The more clearly defined the task is, like a SQL injection is going to be pretty textbook, easy, very strictly defined. DDoS, generally is pretty understandable. These are things you could teach a generalist to do and give them a procedure and they could follow it. If it's the reconnaissance phase, doing research, AI can do that today. And in fact, we do see nation states do that using, LLMs to do research on a targeted company and figure out who their customers and partners and supply chain and locations are in recent news. Things you maybe would have used a Google search for in the past. Now they're using LLMs and they're generating good reconnaissance. Even at a technical level, using it to reconnoiter a target is very feasible. If it's a very defined kind of operation, they had some success proceeding through weaponization up through exfiltration. But the further you get towards the part of a cyber operation that requires judgment, like don't just SQL inject this web page, but do it and get access to the network. Put a host up. Make a shell that calls back out. Don't just do that, but steal a document. Don't just steal a document, but steal a document and don't get caught by the defender. That requires exponentially more judgment and theory of mind about the defender, and we saw less and less success over time. If you look at even that's in a sort of a network environment, live network environment. Even if we give them not necessarily defended, but just harder tasks, puzzles to solve, the straw man, well-defined tasks, 100% success rate. The hardest problems, 0% success rate. But the cybersecurity offensive problems in the middle, not zero, right? We're looking here between 10 and 20% for medium and just under 10% for the hard problems. If you were applying for a job on the red team here, we would expect, high double digit, 75, 80% success rates to be considered as a member of the team. So this is nowhere near a world-class hacker, but it's also not completely unsuccessful. They are able to do today some of the job. They succeed some of the time. So that's similar to, I think Claude Anthropic put out a study recently. They've been entering one of their models into college level cybersecurity competitions. Those models have not won anything, but they typically finish like in the top 25% of the competition. So, well above average consistently but for college level, not professional level. But these are people who probably are generally pursuing degrees in this field. So they're not winning anything. It's only compared to college students. But they are above average. So wherever you want to take that, I guess, is a matter of interpretation. It is feasible that these AI systems could conduct something on offense today and succeed, at least in terms of getting in. Beyond that, I think it falls apart a little bit. What about malware itself? And actually at Google, we have detected a couple of cases of malware that the malware itself uses AI. And it may not be obvious what they use it for. Again, even if you work in this field for a long time, we're sort of all influenced by media, your imagination. You would imagine some wormable, kind of exotic explanation. But in both cases, what the AI is being used for is to sort of modify the code to hide its signature. It's being used for evasion. So here we have an example of probably criminal malware. Just before it hits the target, it makes a call out to Gemini. Gemini won't help with the malware part of it, but for the non-malicious parts of the software, it says take this code, rewrite it so that it does the exact same thing but use different words. So it constantly rewrites the code. The signature changes a little bit. Obviously, it's not working too well. We're catching it, but conceptually, you could imagine how that might be useful. And, so we're not the only ones who think so. APT-28, which is Russian military intelligence, thinks so. Their version of this malware, it calls out to a Chinese LLM, but it's doing the same thing. It's doing it for evasion rather than sort of more interesting purposes. So very briefly, I'll just cover how we use it for defense. We've used our AI systems to find a 0-day in the wild. We knew that it was there. We could see attackers planning to exploit this SSL package. Our AI system was able to go out and search and find that 0-day with a little bit of help. We use AI to patch our software. Roughly 15% of the bugs we find in Google's own software, we're able to automatically patch using this LLM. And perhaps not of interest to everyone, but to me, if you let Gemini write your first draft of your reports for you, we saw a 51% improvement in time saving. So that's 51% more time that our incident responders can spend responding to incidents solely because they're writing it up. So as I said at the top, I'm kind of an optimist on AI in the future being a net positive for defenders. But between here and there, there's going to be certainly the guys on offense are going to be experimenting with it as well. I mean, thank you for your time today.